Abhishek GP, it's absolutely fantastic to have you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on the podcast, Franco. Nice to be here.
And you said you go with GP as the name they normally
That's
use,
right.
right? Okay, perfect.
That's
So
right.
we're gonna go with GP. So I love to begin with a little bit about you and how you got started with B2B demand generation to then become the head of demand generation at Freshworks.
Sure. So my entry into B2B demand gen, has its roots in my experience as a digital marketer and brand marketing in my earlier roles. And thankfully, I've had exposure across B2C and B2B organizations as well. I feel that I got a good understanding of the performance marketing side of demand gen from my stint as a digital marketer and the audience, creative, and copywriting sensibilities from my stint as a brand marketer.
Awesome. And so what kind of I know you had this quite a bit of experience before Freshworks, including I saw American Express and you were at Philips. Can you tell us a little more about those experience before you started working at Freshworks?
Sure. The commonality between those two companies are that they are large multinational corporations, and they have both B2C and B2B arms. Even though their B2C arms are slightly more popular because they have scale, they have an equally larger B2B segment as well. So I had a great exposure to uh, working in marketing for both a B2C and B2B, which have very different, completely different go-to-market motions. And in both those companies, I was heading digital marketing, which means I was responsible for content, creative, acquisition, working with the traditional marketing team, Marcom's team for integrated campaigns, and of course, demand gen from a performance marketing angle. Very rich exposure across diverse set of customers, product segments, and markets. And it's been a great stepping stone for me to sort of finally join Freshworks to lead the global segment marketing team here.
So tell us a little more about your current role at Freshworks. How is your team like? What are your responsibilities and what you do there?
Sure. At Freshworks, I lead a team of content marketers, campaign managers, and sales enablement specialists. Our goal is to generate demand for small businesses and mid-market and enterprise customers and across the globe. My team is responsible for signups or free trials from the SMB segment, and I'm responsible for MQLs and pipeline for the mid-market segment.
And how big is the company in total, Freshworks?
Yeah, sure. So we have about close to 2,500 employees across the globe. We have offices in San Mateo. We have offices in Chennai, in Berlin, and across the globe. It's a fast-growing rocket ship, as we call it, and we are growing by the day.
And how do you divide? Because you said you're taking care of both the small business side, which I assume they have their own kind of sales team and process, as well as the mid-market / enterprise. How do you divide those responsibilities as well as the efforts, the budget, and everything? Is it like silo between the two, or you guys are kind of sharing the work and the time and the efforts between those two segments?
That's a great question, Franco. Right now, it is siloed. So let's say I have a team of about 11 people, and 6 of them are on SMB, and the rest are on mid-market and enterprise. The reason they are also split is, like you mentioned, the sales teams are different, the go-to-market motions are different, the channels and formats that you use would be different. So SMB is over-indexed on inbound and paid as a primary channel. While mid-market and enterprise is a lot more about LinkedIn, influencers, offline events, and whatnot. So right now at this stage, the budgets are fairly siloed. It's definitely over-indexed towards mid-market enterprise because that's where larger spends are, and that's where a higher pipeline value generation opportunity is. And the teams are also divided accordingly. So for example, we have a bunch of content marketing specialists on SMB, some who focus purely on video content. There are others who focus on text content and the engagement with influencers and guest bloggers, etc. Then on the mid-market and enterprise side, we have sales enablement and we have campaign managers. people in my team who conceptualize and design campaigns, generate content, and eventually take it to the market via channels.
This is a very interesting structure that you guys have. So I'm very curious about your system that you use and like tech stack. Do you, for example, share the same database or system and just segmented it, or you have like a separate, I don't know, HubSpot or Marketo or separate CRM? How does that work?
Yeah, so the advantage that we have at Freshworks is that we use a lot of our own products. And for example, our marketing automation system and CRO is Fresh Marketer, which is something that we launched last year, which is doing fairly well. Our CRM is Fresh Sales. And then, of course, we have a bunch of other products around it. For example, we have Allocadia for marketing planning, ROI and attribution. We've just introduced lead space for lead scoring, ICP and profiling. So a bunch of tech stack that we have, but at the center is our product, which is around marketing automation, CRM, things like that.
And so your teams, the SMB and the mid-market, they're all sharing the same instance. You just have different segmentation in terms of like leads and scoring or assignments and all of that.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. You guys have all your own internal system that you can leverage for free, I assume.
Exactly.
Cool. So what is the main challenge that you're trying to solve as a team today from your marketing perspective?
As you would expect from a fast-growing company with multiple products across different markets, there are quite a few challenges that the organization is trying to solve today. One of the challenges that my team is trying to solve is to build a scalable and repeatable demand gen model for mid-market and enterprise segments. I think that's the number one challenge that sort of keeps me awake, which means a bunch of things, right? Which means what's the status of the sales marketing alignment? How are we sort of progressing on the SLAs? So are we different teams, or we look at ourselves as one single team? Then you're talking about having a badass database, right? Audience and segmentation, campaign and content development and execution, and finally analytics. So there's a bunch of seemingly disparate elements that you want to sort of put together and make them work, and that's what our focus has been for the last 1 year.
Very interesting. And are you guys focused on, what is your main market? Is it US or is it outside of the US that you have the majority of your customers?
Yeah, US is by far the biggest market, and the close second is the EU. So US, UK, and EU would be the three biggest markets for us.
And from a metrics perspective, now that we talked the system, I'm always curious to ask about the metrics. And again, you can make the segmentation on the SMB or mid-market, but what are some of the metrics that you track constantly that you have on your dashboards?
Yeah, from the mid-market perspective, at the very top, we of course track leads and MQLs. The next level of metrics are what we would call the impact measures, where we track marketing source and influence pipeline, and we keep a sort of hawk's eye on that. And then finally, the cost measures, which is return on advertising spend. So that's for mid-market. For SMB, the lead metric that we track is traffic. And then eventually what we track and report month on month is signups from our customers, and eventually conversion to paid customers. Those will be the metrics that we track separately for mid-market and SMB.
Do you use any tool to track the funnel for SMBs? Like when you have, traffic versus signups versus conversion to paid customers, or you do that on Excel or some other system?
We use a bunch of internal tools right now. Like I said, all website behavior is captured on Fresh Marketer, which is our own internal product. Yeah. And then, of course, you have GA at the back end to track all conversions and activities on the web. So a bunch of regular tools available in the market, and a couple of them would be internal tools that we use.
But then are you able to aggregate all of this data into one single location, like from GA, for example, or like any other data? Or if your rep sends email out, there's a lot of different touches that can happen to a prospect or an account. Are you guys able to pull them together?
Yeah, we're able to pull them together, but it's still, I would say, we're almost getting there. but it still is slightly desperate as a system. And it's sort of try, and for example, the last mile conversion, which is conversion to paying customers and activity beyond, is something we'll have to pull together post facto. Something we don't have available as of now, if you were to ask me. We are getting there, but we're getting there fast.
Okay. And going again on the metrics, which kind of leads me to talk about attribution. For the mid-market enterprise, how are you tracking attribution? Are you a last touch type of company, or you look at first touch, multi-touch? Like, what kind of model do you apply?
Yeah, so we use a multi-touch attribution model today, Franco, and we use a weighted multi-touch attribution model today. And that's based on experience, right? So we've been using last touch for quite some time. We all know in the pitfalls of last touch. We also know the pitfalls of first touch. We have tried out time series and whatnot. So we've finally arrived at multi-touch weighted attribution, and thankfully we've also got a bunch of tools to support that, right? So we've got the integration between our CRM and marketing automation system that is then connected to Allocadia, which helps us with ROI and attribution. The Allocadia in turn is then connected with Coupa internally, which is our spend tracking software. So we've got a bunch of technology together, which eventually helps us both track spends and the attribution to those spends.
That's awesome. I like how you guys are pulling also the campaign spend, because which is a lot of companies are doing it manually today. So if you guys are able to get it from the actual sources, it's pretty awesome. In terms of you said that you mentioned it was called a weighted attribution, multi-touch attribution. What is the weight that you are applying there? Because I've seen it done in many different ways. Like you can have a weight based on the time frame, or it can be based on what kind of touch it is on the sales cycle, or based on the stage, or based on the role of the person. Like, what is the weight that you apply?
It's based on two parameters as of now. The first parameter is the time frame, which is we started with 180 days touch, then we moved to 120 days. So touches in a certain time frame is a parameter that we use. The other, of course, is the number of times that we engage, the prospect engaged with any of our content. So it's a function of both engagement and a function of time frame as a two parameter.
And are you also able to pull data from like offline events, let's say trade shows, or I don't know, VIP dinners or anything like that?
Not yet. That's something we plans for it were carved out this year, and would have loved to sort of do that starting 2020 Q3. But that's when this all hit, right? So thankfully we are all digital right now, and digital is all 100% trackable in the organization. But once we get back to events, I'm sure with the tech that we have in the lovely marketing operations team that we have, we should be able to track offline events as well, and bring a holistic 360-degree picture.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a problem I hear every single time, and there is a lot of also miscommunication with the sales team when they attend trade shows and they're not able to bring the data back into the CRM. You have maybe a bunch of business cards and data spread all over the place.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gear a little bit. Instead of talking only about metrics, I want to talk about campaigns a little bit and understand. So if you look today, what are your top lead sources at Freshworks? And probably you again have to make the distinction between mid-market and small business.
Sure. If you talk about SMB, the top lead sources is definitely inbound, inbound and paid. The combination of search is what our top channel is, and it's been so for years, right? Like our founder says. We're talking to the Fortune 500,000 companies across the globe, and Google as a channel is readily available to everyone, right? And so we do a fairly good job of sort of tapping into that demand, and therefore search is by far our number one channel when it comes to Google, with a very handsome payback period as well. When it comes to mid-market, LinkedIn has been working really well for us, especially after it turned on interesting formats like conversational ads. So, for example, we've been using a bunch of formats on LinkedIn, including sponsored content lead gen form, conversational ad and email, and the way they've sort of worked together has yielded very good results for us. So LinkedIn is definitely our number one channel. And then we have, third-party partnerships. Partners that have access to audiences that we don't have access to. And they have built those relationships for several years now. And that has been a reliable source of leads as well. But not to forget the regular channels, which is, the referral traffic coming from review sites or partner sites. That there is a steady stream of traffic that comes from there every month. And then, of course, inbound traffic. I also hear a common misconception that mid-market and enterprise customers or prospects don't search, right? Which means everything has to be outbound. That's not true at all. We do see a fair share of inbound signups coming from mid-market and enterprise customers as well. So those collectively would be my top 3 or 4 channels that's working.
Yeah, I cannot agree more on the last part. Definitely, I see like even very senior people from Fortune 1000 companies downloading white papers or coming through search traffic. Like I completely agree with you. And what about account-based marketing? Are you guys active there? Do you guys track by account, or what's your current model?
Yeah, so we haven't actively kickstarted account-based marketing yet. Definitely not the 1:1 account-based marketing that we talk about so often. But what we do is we do a one-to-many account-based marketing, which is, on LinkedIn, for example, we have a set of accounts that we really want to get deeper into. And then, we sort of have activities with our SDR team, AEs, and the marketing team all getting together and identifying and sort of targeting those bunch of companies. But is it happening at a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-few level? Not today. I think we'll get there in the next couple of quarters. That's the part of the plan.
Yeah, to me, like I always thought, account-based marketing like doesn't have to be like the 1-to-1 and 1-to-few. Like it can be, but it really depends on your model and resources, right? And how much value do those accounts bring. So I think you guys are doing pretty good job already on the ABM side. I wanna talk about your sales, the relationship with the sales team. So if we look from a sales alignment perspective, how do you guys work with the sales team? Do you have like regular meetings? Do you have a process in place to hand off leads and then nurture them back? How does that work at Freshworks?
Yeah. So the closest engagement that we have is with our SDR team, sitting out of the same location. So and that is a key relationship for us, right? Because that is where you get a lot of insights from what's happening in terms of customer calls, and therefore what are the interventions that the demand gen team can help with. Is pricing an issue? Is messaging an issue? Is positioning an issue? So there are lots of big decisions that get made because you're so close to your SDR team. I think that's step 1 for us. Step 2 is, hey, you identify those gaps based on your interactions, based on results and conversions, and then you sort of feedback sales enablement materials and coaching and have sessions with them, etc. Step 2 is to think about a deeper engagement with AEs, who of course are one step away. So the engagement with AEs are a lot more about supporting them in a lot of deals, right? And a lot of big deals especially. So that is where a lot of demand gen and AE interaction happens. While a majority of discussions that happen are between the demand gen team, the SDR team, and the AE team. So what we do is, of course, we have SLAs amidst us in terms of the lead handoff time. In fact, we go back to the drawing board also, and we think about campaigns together, right? So there are deep discussions that happen on what kind of campaigns should we be doing? Why should we be doing some campaigns? Is it solving a certain audience problem? Is it opening a certain market segment for us, right? So these are the questions that we start off discussing with the AE teams across different markets. And once that is set, and once the sort of leads start flowing in, there is a lead handoff SLA that happens, and then there are monthly meetings on certain accounts in terms of their behavior and how they have been engaging with us in terms of conversion and sales cycle, etc. So there is a deep engagement that we have with AEs separately, but a majority of interactions that we have are with SDRs in terms of feeding insights, handing off leads, because they are our primary customer. Let's say that.
And so I assume SDRs reports under sales at Freshworks, right?
Now, at Freshworks, SDRs report into the SDR director, who in turn reports into the VP of Global Growth and Marketing. So
Okay.
SDRs at Freshworks report into growth and marketing team.
And so in your opinion, do you think it's better when the SDRs reports under marketing or under sales, or maybe a combination of the two?
It's a great question, Franco. I've been thinking about it for some time now. There are definitely advantages of SDRs reporting into global growth and marketing. Because I feel that while there is a very deep engagement that SDRs have with AEs, there is a lot of value that demand gen marketers can extract from this relationship with SDRs as well. For example, what I've seen traditionally is that if the SDRs report into sales teams, it gets very difficult for marketers to get regular access to them, right? Because for example, all the issues and insights around insight generation, call listening, enablement and coaching, all of them become far difficult when they report into sales, because then the objectives become very different. In this case, at Freshworks, we work hand in glove. So the problems that SDRs are facing is our problems, and likewise. So I have begun to strongly lean towards SDRs reporting into growth and marketing, and it seems to be working well for us.
That's awesome. It's usually a controversial question when I
Yeah.
ask, so I heard every kind of answer, and maybe there's not a right answer, but I always like to ask it. And kind of, I want to ask you a few more questions in terms of campaigns, just something that we can learn. What is the most successful campaign that you have run? And it doesn't have to be a Freshworks, it can be maybe in a previous experience, something that really worked out well, maybe more than what you expected. And then at the same time, what is the least successful campaign that you ran? Something that maybe got you zero results, and it's something you wouldn't do that again.
That's always a great question, right? Because it forces you to introspect. A successful campaign that sort of that is fresh in my memory is what we call the silent revolution. Now, this was for our product, Fresh Sales, which is in the category of CRM. Now, the core insight behind this campaign was that we've been hearing murmurs from sales decision makers about how not so satisfied they are with their CRM, right? Some of them believe that their CRMs were large, clunky, difficult to use. They always sort of see low adoption rates. And of course, the time to value is high. And eventually the ROI, right? That doesn't make sense at all. So we've been hearing these murmurs for some time now, and we thought, hey, why not really pick up on this and think about a campaign around this? Now, so that's where the idea really germinated. And what we needed at that stage is really to quantify that pain, right? Are there numbers around this pain? What percentage of audience is not so satisfied, right? What percentage of audience is happy with the CRM? So it's a great data point to know. And who better than someone like a Forrester Research, who we could commission. It's a neutral expert entity, and we did a quantitative survey with them, with sales decision makers, to really understand their experience around CRM, and eventually were they happy, not happy, discontented, satisfied, etc. And it threw out some very interesting results as well. The next step, of course, was to take this report out to the market and bring this campaign to life. That's where we used multiple channels and formats. So we had a sort of fairly elongated pre-buzz stage where we used a lot of influencers to share their perspectives on what CRM ought to be. So what CRM promised a few years back and where it is today, for example. Right? And then we used multiple channels like display, LinkedIn, and whatnot to convey this message around X percentage of sales leaders being not so happy with their CRM. Right? Then we did a bunch of webinars with Forrester and with other entities, just talking about this concept. So the key message and the learning here was that you need to really reinforce your message over a period of time and across channels and formats. And only then does a concept really sort of sink in. And that took some time. So the campaign duration was about 2.5, 3 months. It was that long, which also meant that we had to focus only on this and say no to everything else. So, and this campaign delivered great results for us in terms of leads, MQLs, and all of them are in the pipeline, right now. So we hope to generate good results out of this campaign. On the other question of of what's not worked as a campaign? And that's a more interesting question, because it's the same campaign that we did several months ago that was not successful. And it's a funny story. And you might ask why. So the previous version of the campaign that we didn't do as well. And the insight was the same, nothing changed. But there are 3 or 4 key reasons that come to mind why it might not have worked as well. One was that the acceptance of your message by the audience is dependent also on the level of awareness of your product, right? A product that is new to the market, that hasn't really done much of outbound, and your audience is not aware of your product. If you go to them with a message that's surprising, that's different, that has a point of view, they might not really believe you, right? You need to go through that chain of know, like, trust, right? Which we hadn't. So I don't think the product was there from an awareness perspective, several months ago. That's reason number one. The other reason I thought it might not have worked well is because we were making a possible claim without any evidence to back it up, right? We didn't have a survey back then. We didn't have much data points back then. So it's very clear that when you're making a claim, you need to sound credible. And therefore, you might want to rely on an expert authority to be neutral and to talk about that pain versus you talking about that pain. And the third piece, of course, is more tactical, which is, did we select the right set of channels? Did we select the right set of formats? Our understanding about the sales personas and audience was fairly limited back then. So I think a mix of these reasons really impacted why the campaign didn't really take off. So that would be perhaps my least successful recent campaign.
I love this. I love this. It's always very interesting to hear, and this is very uncommon story to have a similar campaign both going really well and not so well.
Yeah, that's odd, right?
That's fantastic. I want to ask you one last question before I leave you, and is can you share with us one hack? And for hack, I mean maybe something that didn't cost any money or something that was just very unusual, but it worked out really well, and it was a very profitable move that you made.
Yeah. So, I'll tell you one that costs money, but that can yield great results, right? Something demand gen marketers don't talk about often. And something I found out a few months back. It's not really a hack, but it's possibly a philosophy that one must have for every single campaign that you run on LinkedIn. So, this is what happened. LinkedIn has been a top channel for some time now. And I've been thinking about it quite a bit, right? In terms of how do you optimize better? How do you squeeze a lot more out of the campaign, both in terms of contact capture, both in terms of engagement, and eventually CPL. In one of the experiments that we did last time, what was clear was that the frequency of reach as a parameter is a big predictor of lead capture. So what I mean to say is that, as marketers, we focus so much on, reach, CTR, number of leads that have dropped, CPL and whatnot. But there are some important campaign optimization parameters that we completely miss out on that have the potential to completely transform your campaign. So for example, one of those metrics that we found out was frequency of reach. So for example, if we realized that if we tune up the frequency of reach to, let's say, 5 or 6, which means the average exposure of a campaign to a prospect is about 5 or 6 times in a certain duration, there is a significantly higher probability of converting that prospect, right? Which means there is a bunch of campaigns earlier that we were under optimizing for, because we weren't really focused on frequency of reach as a parameter. Now, as soon as we dialed up this parameter and we sort of started focusing a lot more on it, there is a clear increase and improvement in the lead flow that we begin to get. So the 2 learnings here were, you need to expose your prospect to a lot of content, a variety of content, and far more often. And if you do that really well over a period of time, your CPLs will reduce, your lead flow will increase. That's the big insight that I had. And I would say that's bigger than hack, because that's something that works every single time.
But so in order to accomplish this, because obviously if you continue bombarding the prospect with the same content, it will actually be penalized by LinkedIn. So you need to continuously rotate new content. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right, Franco. So you need to have a bunch of, I would say, top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel content. because people are at different stages and people move through different stages in different timelines, right? So it's not necessarily the other assumption that people have is, you need to start with tofu and eventually at someday you will move to tofu. That's not okay. There is a bunch of prospects who are sitting there ready to engage, ready to have a conversation. So like you said, you need a variety of content across different funnel stages.
And so do you separate the content and the campaigns on LinkedIn for top of the funnel and bottom of the funnel, or you keep them all in one single campaign because the audience is the same?
We keep them in the same campaign. Again, we really sort of want to mix and match, and we really want to understand what's working well, and that can't really happen when you sort of have separated those as separate campaigns. So we really like to mix different kinds of content. For example, in top of funnel we have survey reports and trend reports and whatnot. In bottom of the funnel content we have something more about the category, something like a buying guide, and eventually the product. So we keep all of them sort of bunched together in one campaign, and that's where we get a lot of outcomes for our tests.
That's awesome. And how many times do you normally swap the content? Do you wait to see if it's not working anymore, or is something you do as a cadence, I don't know, weekly or monthly?
That's a great question, Franco. So there are a couple of parameters that I look at to decide whether we want to sort of swap content. The first is to look at measures around fatigue, right? The measures around fatigue would be declining CTR over a period of time. Is engagement really reducing? Number one. Number two, are we really overextending on the frequency of reach, right? If we know that the ideal frequency of reach has to be about 5, are we already on 8? Which means we are done with the audience, right? We're done with a piece of content. So these are some lead metrics that I would use to sort of swap. And of course, the final metric that you would still think about is both the number of leads that are dropping by and the CPL. So is the CPL beginning to balloon up because of lower CTR, right? So we look at those 4 metrics over a period of time to decide whether to pause this content and swap it out with something else.
Fantastic. This is awesome feedback. I think some advanced tactics for LinkedIn is always useful, since most of us are spending money on LinkedIn. So that's great to hear. GP, it was really great having you as a guest on the episode today. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Franco, for having me. Loved chatting with you here.